This is the moment that costs him everything. Before the night ends, this officer will lose his badge, his job, and the quiet protection that once followed him from shift to shift. Before the week is over, his name will be stapled to a civil complaint thick enough to stop a career mid-breath. And before the year closes, a city will write a check for $7.7 million, not because of a violent crime, but because of arrogance masquerading as authority. What you're watching is not a traffic stop. It's a test of restraint. And the officer is already failing. The subject sits motionless behind the wheel, shoulders squared, hands visible, voice steady, in a way that only exhaustion can produce. 18 hours inside an operating room has burned something clean into him. Patience. The kind that doesn't beg, and the kind that doesn't flinch. He has stitched strangers back from the edge of death all day. Now he is being treated like a threat for existing at night. The officer leans in, posture forward, tone clipped. This is not curiosity. It's predatory certainty. He has decided who this man is before a single fact enters the room. Bias doesn't announce itself. It settles in, comfortable, like it belongs there. And here's why this moment is dangerous for the officer's career. He's talking more than he's listening. In civil court, every extra word is a fingerprint. License now. Not a request. A command designed to establish dominance. When the subject explains, calmly, that he's reaching, the officer hears defiance where there is none. His jaw tightens. Authority questioned is authority threatened. The subject's dignity becomes a weapon. And he doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't mirror the aggression. He names what's happening without emotion. That restraint forces the officer into a corner, because if the subject isn't acting suspicious, then the suspicion must come from somewhere else. And that somewhere else has a history. Every 45 seconds in this encounter, the officer makes a choice that narrows his exit. This is the first. He escalates without cause. Step out of the car. No explanation, no lawful clarity, just power, naked and impatient. The subject asks a question, not a challenge, a question. For what reason? In policing, this is the line between professionalism and insolence, and the officer chooses insolence. Because I said so. Those 4 words have ended more careers than gunfire ever did. The subject stays seated, hands visible, voice level. He understands something the officer doesn't. Compliance doesn't require humiliation. The law doesn't ask for obedience to ego, and courts remember the difference. This is the second dangerous moment. The officer reframes calm as resistance. He needs it to be resistance. Without it, there is no justification for what he's about to do next, so he manufactures tension with language. Last warning. Warnings imply danger. Danger implies force. Force implies reason. But the reason isn't there. The subject says it plainly. I'm not resisting. The officer answers with a threat. You're about to be. That's the third mistake, pre-announcing force. In the anatomy of a lawsuit, this is a confession wearing a uniform. The subject's mind is elsewhere. He's replaying a surgical checklist he's memorized since residency. Airway, bleeding, time. Control. Calm saves lives. Panic kills them. He applies the same logic here. His dignity is not loud. It's unshakable. The officer steps back, radio crackling against his shoulder. He hasn't called it in yet. He's still deciding whether to win or to be right. This pause matters, because once the radio lights up, the story leaves his control. Here's why that matters for his career. Supervisors don't protect unpredictability, they document it. The officer circles, scanning the car like he's looking for permission. The subject watches him in the mirror, eyes steady. He knows how men with power behave when it slips. They get smaller, louder, more insistent. Hands where I can see them. They already are. This is the fourth dangerous moment, repeating commands that are already being followed, It signals panic. And panic undercuts authority faster than any insult. The subject breathes in, slow, deliberate. He speaks again, measured. He names his exhaustion, not to plead, but to explain. He is humanizing himself in a system that profits from dehumanization. That contrast is lethal to misconduct. The officer bristles. You think you're special? There it is. The ego breach. The stop stops being about traffic. It becomes about hierarchy, about who gets to speak, about who gets to question. The subject doesn't bite. I think I'm tired and compliant. That sentence will be read aloud one day, by an attorney, to a jury, slowly. The officer's hand hovers near his belt, not because of danger, because of control. He feels it slipping. He feels watched, by the camera, by the night, by the version of himself that knows better. Yes, this is the fifth dangerous moment. Body cameras don't just record actions, they record temperament, and temperament is what juries punish. A notification chirps on the radio, a routine flag. The officer glances down. He didn't call it in, but someone noticed the duration, the tone, the escalation. A supervisor's voice cuts through the static. Unit 12, status check. The officer doesn't answer right away, neither does the night. And in that silence, everything he's built starts to come apart. The silence after the supervisor's call is not accidental. It's calculated. The officer stares at his radio like it has betrayed him. Because in his mind, it has. The stop was supposed to be private, another forgettable assertion of control in the dark. Now it has witnesses. Now it has gravity. Unit 12. A status check. The subject turns his head slightly. Not toward the officer, toward the sound, toward accountability. His hands remain visible. His breathing never changes. This is where careers start bleeding out. The officer presses the radio. His voice is tighter now, stripped of swagger. Traffic stop. Everything's fine. Everything is not fine, and everyone listening knows it. Here's why this moment is dangerous for the officer's career. Once a supervisor is looped in, the narrative freezes. You don't get to rewrite tone. You don't get to explain intent. All you get is what the camera heard and what your mouth couldn't stop saying. The supervisor asks for the location. The officer answers. Too quickly. Over-eager. Like a child insisting he didn't break anything while shards are still falling. The subject speaks again, as calm as a scalpel. Am I being detained, or am I free to go? That question detonates softly. It's not hostile. It's not loud. It's precise. And precision terrifies people who rely on improvisation to justify power. The officer ignores it. That's the sixth mistake. Ignoring a lawful question doesn't erase it. It magnifies it. Courts read silence as avoidance. Juries read it as guilt. The officer paces once, then stops. His boots scrape the pavement. He looks back at the subject, eyes narrowed, searching for something, anything that can justify the next step. He finds nothing, so he creates friction instead. You got an attitude, no evidence, just accusation. The subject meets his gaze for the first time, not with anger, with disappointment, the kind reserved for professionals who should know better. I'm answering you respectfully. That sentence lands heavier than any insult, because it reframes the entire encounter, one man performing authority, the other embodying it. Here's why this is dangerous for the officer. Respect on camera is contagious. Viewers, jurors, instinctively side with the calm voice, especially when the other side sounds threatened by it. The officer's hand finally drops from his belt, not because he's calmer, but because he realizes force won't look good anymore. The calculation shifts. Damage control replaces dominance. He asks again for the license. The subject hands it over slowly, smooth, deliberate. No sudden movements, no drama. His name is clear. His profession is printed beneath it. Trauma surgeon. The officer's eyes flicker. Just for a fraction of a second. Enough. This is the seventh dangerous moment, the new information that should de-escalate, but doesn't. Because if the subject is accomplished, educated, essential, then the officer's behavior becomes harder to explain. Bias hates credentials. They expose it. "You come from work?" the officer asks. "Yes." "What kind of work?" The subject answers. There's a pause, a long one. The officer nods like this explains something. It doesn't. It indicts. He walks back to his cruiser. The camera catches his shoulders sagging. The swagger is gone. In its place, irritation. Not at the subject, but at the situation for refusing to bend. This is where most officers recover. They reset. They disengage. They let it go. He doesn't. Instead, he runs the license longer than necessary. He asks dispatch questions he already knows the answers to. He stretches time, hoping pressure will do what authority no longer can. But the subject waits, calm, unmoving. His dignity doesn't erode under delay. It sharpens. Every extra minute becomes a line item. The supervisor's voice returns. "Unit 12, what's the reason for the stop?" The officer hesitates. That hesitation is fatal. Equipment violation," he says finally. It's thin. Everyone knows it, including him. Here's why this moment ends careers. When justification arrives late, it arrives suspect. Courts ask why it took so long, why it appeared only after scrutiny. The supervisor asks follow-up questions, calm, methodical. The officer answers, but his voice lacks conviction. He's building a story while standing inside it. The subject hears everything. When the officer returns, his posture is different, smaller, controlled. He hands back the license. "You're free to go," he says. No apology, no explanation, just retreat. The subject doesn't move immediately. He looks at the officer steady. "For the record, I complied the entire time." That's the final cut, because now the record includes his voice saying it. The officer nods once, stiff. He steps back. The subject drives away, slowly, lawfully, without spectacle. But the night isn't over for the officer, because somewhere, a supervisor is filing notes. Somewhere, footage is being bookmarked. Somewhere, a city attorney will one day watch this stop in silence, counting every unnecessary word. The officer returns to his cruiser and sits there longer than he should. The radio hums. The street feels emptier now, colder. He doesn't know it yet, but this was the last stop of his old career. It's the first exhibit in a case that will cost the city millions. The lawsuit doesn't begin with anger. It begins with silence. Weeks after the stop, the officer is called into an office that smells like recycled air and institutional patience. No raised voices, no accusations. Just a monitor, paused on his own face, frozen in the exact moment his authority curdled into insecurity. This is where power dynamics reverse. He sits straighter than usual, uniform pressed, jaw set. He tells himself this is routine. Internal reviews happen all the time. He's survived complaints before. People lie. Cameras don't always tell the whole story. But this time, the camera didn't miss anything. Here's why this moment is catastrophic for his career. The subject never lost control. No shouting, no sudden movements, no resistance. And that leaves the officer exposed, alone with his tone, his choices, his bias. The investigator presses play. "Because I said so." The room doesn't react. That's worse than judgment. Silence forces reflection, and reflection is unforgiving. The officer shifts in his chair. He explains. He contextualizes. He uses words like perceived threat and officer safety. He speaks in rehearsed phrases, the kind passed down in locker rooms like folklore. But the video keeps playing. "I'm not resisting. You're about to be." That line lands differently now, stripped of adrenaline, stripped of the night. In daylight, it sounds exactly like what it is, a promise of force in search of justification. The investigator pauses the footage. "Why did you say that?" The officer answers too quickly. That's mistake number 8. He says the subject was argumentative, that he felt challenged, that compliance wasn't immediate enough. But the video contradicts him in real time. Hands visible, voice level, body still. This is where the psychology turns predatory, just not in the way he expects. The investigator isn't hunting him. He's documenting him. Every explanation is another data point. Every rationalization, another brick in a wall the department can later step away from, because departments don't defend indefensible behavior. They distance themselves from it. The subject, meanwhile, is back at work, back under fluorescent lights, back in trauma bays where seconds decide futures. He doesn't talk about the stop unless asked. He doesn't dramatize it. That restraint follows him into the legal process, and juries feel that. And here's why that matters. Credibility compounds. Calm on the street becomes calm on the stand, and calm beats authority when authority looks afraid of it. When the civil complaint is filed, it reads less like an accusation and more like an autopsy. Every minute time-stamped, every command dissected, every escalation weighed against policy the officer swore to uphold. $7.7 million doesn't come from a single mistake. It comes from a pattern the city can't ignore. Depositions begin. The officer sits under oath now. No badge buffer, no radio, just a microphone and his own words, locked in. He's asked why he didn't explain the reason for the stop immediately. He says he didn't have to. He's asked why he escalated after compliance. He says it felt necessary. He's asked why he ignored the question about detention. He pauses. That pause is recorded. Here's why this moment is lethal. Pauses reveal doubt, and doubt under oath reads like dishonesty. Across the table, the subject watches. Same posture, same steady gaze. He answers questions the way he handles trauma cases. Precise, unemotional, grounded in facts. When asked how the stop made him feel, he doesn't say angry. He says concerned. Not for himself, but for what could have happened if he'd matched the officer's aggression. That answer changes the room. Because now the narrative isn't about hurt feelings, it's about risk. About what unchecked ego can do when armed with authority. The city's lawyers exchange looks. They've seen this before. This is the point where cases stop being winnable and start being survivable. Internal Affairs completes its review. The findings are careful, measured, damning. An unprofessional conduct, failure to de-escalate, improper escalation without articulable cause. The officer reads the report alone. His name appears too often. His explanations quoted verbatim. The words, inconsistent with video evidence, repeat like a drumbeat. This is the 9th dangerous moment. Paper outlives reputation. He's placed on administrative leave, paid for now. His fellow officers avoid eye contact, not out of malice, out of self-preservation. No one wants proximity to a sinking narrative. The body cam footage leaks, not officially, but inevitably. Online, viewers don't debate policy. They react to tone, to arrogance, to the way power was flexed against dignity and lost. The comments are brutal, relentless, permanent. The city settles, $7.7 million. No admission of wrongdoing, just math. Risk assessment. At optics, the officer learns about it the same way everyone else does, through a headline. His name isn't in it, not yet, but he knows what comes next. Termination paperwork doesn't arrive dramatically. It's quiet, clinical. A meeting that lasts less than 10 minutes. They thank him for his service. That's it. Here's the final truth of this stop. The officer wasn't undone by resistance. He was undone by composure he couldn't dominate. The subject never raised his voice, never touched the officer, never broke the law. He simply refused to surrender his dignity, and that refusal exposed everything. The body cam shuts off, but the consequences don't.